They were Hollywood's golden couple, ethereal, enigmatic, and seemingly untouchable. But as is so often the case with fairy tales, what the world saw on red carpets and glossy magazine covers only told half the story. Behind the flashbulbs and fanfare were two very young, very emotional people trying to navigate not only the chaotic world of fame, but also a love that burned with the kind of intensity that's impossible to sustain. At 53, Winona Ryder is finally peeling back the curtain just a bit. And what she's revealing isn't a scandalous tell-all or a bombshell accusation. It's quieter than that, more nuanced, but in many ways, it's even more powerful. Because for the first time, we're hearing not just about what Johnny Depp did or didn't do, but about what it felt like to be a young woman swept up in a love that was equal parts magic and mayhem. Winona Ryder and Johnny Depp's relationship began like a Hollywood script. They met in 1989 at the premiere of Great Balls of Fire, and it was reportedly love at first sight. Winona, just 17, was still on the brink of womanhood, navigating fame after the success of Beetlejuice. Johnny, at 26, was already cementing his status as an icon thanks to his breakout role in 21 Jump Street and his unconventional choices that followed. They came from different worlds, yet somehow they fit, or at least they tried to. Within months, they were inseparable. Johnny proposed just 5 months into their relationship, a bold and impulsive move that mirrored the way they loved, fast, deep, and all-consuming. He famously got a tattoo on his arm that read, "Winona Forever," a gesture that became emblematic of their devotion. To outsiders, they were the embodiment of young, passionate love. But the reality was far more complicated. Winona has since described Johnny as her first real love. It was the kind of connection that shakes your foundation, that changes how you see yourself and the world. But she was still so young, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Being in a relationship with someone 9 years older, especially in the high-pressure environment of early 90s Hollywood, created an unbalanced dynamic. One partner was still discovering herself. The other was already weathered by fame, criticism, and internal turmoil. The signs that something wasn't quite right were there, even then. Behind their picture-perfect image were the whispers of volatility, jealous arguments, mood swings, periods of emotional withdrawal, followed by intense affection. These weren't unusual behaviors in passionate relationships, especially among artists known for their sensitivity, but the impact was profound. By 1993, the relationship had crumbled under the weight of its own intensity. Their breakup was sudden, devastating, and very public. Johnny spoke candidly about it at the time, saying that the pressure of fame contributed to their split and that he couldn't handle the media scrutiny. Winona, on the other hand, said very little. She simply vanished from the narrative, letting the world fill in the blanks. In later years, she admitted that the breakup sent her into a tailspin. She referred to that period as one of the darkest of her life, saying she didn't know how to function without him. She felt shattered, emotionally and mentally, and the heartbreak bled into every aspect of her world. She even once mentioned in an interview that she was embarrassingly dramatic about the breakup, locking herself away, unable to get out of bed, struggling to make sense of the pain. Yet, even in her darkest moments, Winona never spoke ill. Of Johnny, she never turned their private struggles into tabloid fodder. That kind of discretion is rare in Hollywood, especially in the years before mutual respect became a standard PR line. Her silence wasn't a calculated move. It was a form of protection, not just for Johnny, but for herself. Fast forward to the 2020s, and Johnny Depp finds himself in the center of one of the most highly publicized legal battles in entertainment history, his defamation trial against ex-wife Amber Heard. The world became fixated on who he was, what he'd done, what he hadn't done, what kind of man he really was behind closed doors. People from his past were pulled into the spotlight, asked to weigh in, to add their voice to the growing cacophony of narratives. And then Winona broke her silence. But not with a bombshell or a tell-all. Instead, she provided a written statement to support Johnny, saying unequivocally that he had never been violent or abusive toward her. She said she only ever knew him to be loving and protective. For many, this felt like the closing chapter a final word from someone who knew him intimately and had nothing to gain. But as the years passed and as Winona herself continued to grow and reflect, another layer emerged. In a recent interview tied to her 53rd birthday, she offered a more nuanced reflection. She didn't recant anything from her testimony. She stood by the statement that Johnny was never physically abusive toward her. But she acknowledged that their relationship, while filled with love, was also filled with emotional instability. She described how Johnny would go through deep waves of sadness, mood swings, and emotional volatility that left her feeling unsteady. It wasn't violent, but it was still damaging. She said she often felt like she had to walk on eggshells, never quite sure what version of him she'd be met with on any given day. That kind of unpredictability can be deeply unsettling, especially for someone so young and unformed. You start to adapt, to bend yourself into shapes that feel safer, more palatable, more agreeable, until you no longer recognize your own reflection. She wasn't trying to vilify Johnny. That's what's so striking about her account. She wasn't out for blood. She didn't label him an abuser. Instead, she spoke from a place of reflection, of having spent decades unpacking what those years did to her psyche. She talked about the long-term impact of being in a relationship where you feel emotionally unsteady, how it can hollow you out, make you question your worth, your instincts, your ability to trust. Winona said she tried to carry Johnny's pain. For him, she saw that he was hurting, struggling, and she wanted to help. But in doing so, she lost pieces of herself. She abandoned her own emotional needs, believing that love meant sacrifice, meant fixing the other person, even if it destroyed her in the process. And this perhaps is the most powerful part of her story. Because how many of us have done the same? How many of us have mistaken emotional labor for love? Have silenced our own pain because we didn't want to add to someone else's burden? Winona's story isn't just about Johnny Depp. It's about what happens when we romanticize pain, when we confuse intensity for intimacy. Her decision to speak out now is deeply intentional. This isn't some random, attention-seeking move. It's a conscious, deeply personal act rooted in both reflection and growth. At 53, Winona Ryder has had decades to sit with the silence, to process the emotional weight of what she went through during her relationship with Johnny Depp. She's done the work, privately, in therapy, away from the glare of public speculation. And now, with age and experience on her side, she's decided it's time to finally tell her truth. Not to hurt anyone, not to settle old scores, but to extend a lifeline to others, especially young women, who might find themselves caught in similarly confusing, emotionally complicated relationships. She said she wants younger women to understand that what she went through wasn't just about romance, fame, or youthful mistakes. It was about emotional patterns that she didn't have the tools to name at the time. When you're young and in love, especially with someone older, more powerful, more experienced, it's easy to mistake emotional turbulence for intensity. She described how those dramatic mood shifts and emotional highs and lows were intoxicating at first. They felt like passion, like proof of how deeply they loved each other. But over time, those same emotional swings became exhausting. She never knew what to expect, whether she'd be greeted with affection or pulled into a storm of sadness and outbursts. Winona admitted that it was confusing. Johnny wasn't cruel to her in the way people typically associate with emotional abuse. He didn't yell at her in public or try to control her every move, but there was a kind of volatility that seeped into their relationship. One minute he'd be soft, tender, full of love. The next he could become withdrawn, brooding, weighed down by something she couldn't touch. She said it felt like she was constantly trying to keep the peace, trying not to trigger a change in mood, trying to be everything he needed, his calm, his anchor, his reason to smile again. And in doing so, she stopped being herself. That's the message she's trying to get across now, that love isn't supposed to cost you your identity, that real intimacy doesn't require you to shrink or walk on eggshells just to keep someone else from falling apart. For years, she carried the burden of wondering whether she had failed him, whether she could have done more to save him, to make him feel whole. But she's come to understand that it wasn't her responsibility to fix someone else's internal battles. She loved him deeply. That much hasn't changed. but she also recognizes that love alone isn't enough to make a relationship healthy, or to heal a person who hasn't done their own inner work. She said she wants girls and young women, especially those idolizing passionate whirlwind romances, to understand that emotional instability shouldn't be romanticized. That it's not a sign of a deeper love when someone lashes out and then pulls you back in with apologies and grand gestures. That being constantly anxious about someone's mood or behavior isn't a normal part of being in love. It's emotional. Wear and tear, and it leaves scars that often take years to notice, let alone heal. What's especially powerful about Winona's reflection is how gently she holds both her own pain and Johnny's humanity. She doesn't label him a monster. She doesn't try to cancel him or rewrite history as if she never cared for him. On the contrary, she's honest about the fact that she loved him profoundly, and that part of her always hoped he'd find healing. But she's also clear about the fact that her love didn't excuse the emotional damage she endured, that loving someone doesn't mean you stay silent about the parts that hurt you, and that speaking up about those parts doesn't mean you stop caring about the person. It's a radical kind of honesty, one that acknowledges complexity. She isn't telling her story to tear Johnny down, but to lift others up, to help people. Recognize that emotional harm can exist even in relationships that look perfect from the outside, that pain doesn't always come with bruises. Sometimes it comes with silence, confusion, or the quiet unraveling of your sense of self. Winona also said that, looking back, she wishes someone had told her what she knows now, that real love doesn't make you feel small, that you shouldn't have to earn peace in a relationship by constantly managing someone else's emotions. That being young and inexperienced doesn't mean you deserve less respect or emotional safety. She said she wants this story to be a voice for her younger self, the girl who thought love meant giving everything, even when it left her empty. Insiak, a world where the line between love and pain is often blurred in the media, especially in celebrity culture. Winona's story serves as a reminder that boundaries matter, that emotional health isn't a luxury. It's a necessity, and that even the most glamorous relationships can hide invisible fractures that break people from the inside out. She's choosing to speak now because she believes in the power of storytelling to prevent harm. She knows that there are young women out there today who are confused, overwhelmed, unsure of whether what they're experiencing is love or emotional manipulation. And she wants them to hear her loud and clear. If you're constantly second-guessing yourself, constantly afraid of how your partner will react, constantly sacrificing your peace to keep someone else calm, that's not love. That's a red flag, and she doesn't want anyone else to spend decades trying to piece themselves back together because they thought it was normal. It took her more than 30 years to fully process what happened in that relationship, to understand the long-term impact it had on her emotional well-being, and to find the courage to speak about it, not from a place of bitterness, but from a place of growth. That kind of healing isn't linear, it's slow. Sometimes it's invisible, but it's real. And in telling her story now, Winona is reclaiming something powerful. Her voice, her truth, her past. She's not trying to erase what happened, just trying to make sense of it, to make peace with it, and hopefully to give others permission to do the same. She also made it clear that healing is not a straight line. It took her 3 decades to reach a point where she could even name what had happened to her. That's not weakness, that's survival. She had to go through therapy, through breakdowns and breakthroughs, to finally reclaim her voice. What's extraordinary is her ability to hold 2 conflicting truths: that Johnny was hurting, and that his pain hurt her. She doesn't excuse the damage, but she understands its source. That level of compassion, especially after all this time, is rare, and it offers a more honest picture of what emotional trauma can look like. Because sometimes the relationships that leave the deepest scars don't involve bruises or screaming matches. Sometimes they involve silence, unspoken expectations, shifting emotional tides that leave you constantly off balance. And when the world is telling you how lucky you are to be with someone so special, it becomes even harder to admit that something feels wrong. Winona's story is a testament to the quiet ways love can wound us, and the even quieter ways we heal. As she said in her interview, "I was deeply hurt, but I never stopped hoping he'd heal too." That sentence says everything. It's not vengeful, it's not bitter, it's simply honest. She wanted him to find peace, even as she struggled to find her own. Maybe that's why she stayed silent for so long. Maybe she believed that by protecting him, she was doing the right thing. But now she sees that silence doesn't serve anyone, least of all the younger version of herself who didn't know how to ask for help. Winona's story is a gift, not just for those who've loved deeply and lost painfully, but for anyone who's still trying to make sense of their past. She's showing us that it's okay to speak your truth, even years later. That honesty isn't about revenge, it's about reclaiming your story. So where does that leave us? With a deeper, more complex understanding of what love can look like. With a reminder that even the most beautiful relationships can leave invisible scars, and with the hope that, in speaking out, we make space for others to do the same. If Winona can find peace after decades of pain, maybe there's hope for all of us, and maybe, just maybe, Winona Forever wasn't just about him, maybe it's about her, finally, fully, forever, choosing herself.